Dr. Bahaudin Mujtaba is a professor of management, human resources management, organizational behavior, and international management. He has served as a faculty member, director, and department chair at the Huizenga College of Business and Entrepreneurship at Nova Southeastern University since 1996. And I'm so glad that you could join me today. Thank you. Thank you so much again, Dr. Mujtaba.
It's good to be with you, and thank you for highlighting these important issues that we all need to be aware of, and hopefully treat all of our employees with respect and dignity in every workplace.
Thank you. And I really appreciate that. And I'm so grateful that I found a video that this is how I guess I should explain how we connected. I found a video of yours that discussed an article that you wrote about workplace mobbing, and you described in some detail in this video about what it is, some terms and definitions of what that is, some legal ramifications of this, and how it can be prevented and dealt with in the workplace. So I suppose to start, what is workplace mobbing?
Well, in its simple format or definition, workplace mobbing is the act of bullying others in the work environment through collective means. It's not just one individual, but more than one individuals basically working together to isolate and bully others. So these types of actions are, as we know, are always negative. And in this case of workplace mobbing, it would be continuous and tends to intensify over time. So the longer you're associating with this individual who is initiating mobbing or the group of individuals, the more intense it becomes over time until the person is either leaving the company or the organization or the department, or he or she is terminated. So mobbing is not necessarily a conflict that occurs a single time or at one incident, and it can have many forms and types actually. So mobbing and workplace bullying can include professional, emotional, verbal, as well as physical abuse coming in downward, upward, inward, in horizontal format. So there are many different ways that mobbing can take place. More specifically, workplace mobbing is one form of bullying, which specifically isolates one victim and causes him or her humiliation and psychological abuse, which not only tends to affect a worker's productivity, but it also has an effect on the employee's overall health and productivity of the department and the brand recognition of the organization as well. So mobbing can result in a lot of stress and anxiety on the part of the employee that is actually experiencing the mobbing, but also on the part of those who are witnessing the mobbing. So the impact goes beyond just the one person who's actually a victim of the workplace mobbing. And different examples of workplace mobbing can include slander, gossip, rumors, disrespect, intimidation, stonewalling, excluding a person from projects or from meeting, ignoring him or her, physical or even verbal abuse. As I mentioned, humiliation, even in some cases, yelling at somebody and screaming inappropriately, making derogatory comments, being biased, and having inappropriate jokes at the presence or at the cost of this person who is considered to be a victim. And in some cases, when the person is a senior person or a boss, setting impossible deadlines that he or she cannot possibly meet, or has to work extra hours to basically meet the specific targets that has been set for him, and also tampering with the target's personal belongings can be examples of various forms of workplace mobbing in today's environment.
Okay, thank you very much for that. That was fantastic. Thank you. Now, when you mentioned it can come downward, upward, then is it fair to say that managers can also be mobbed by subordinates as well as management down onto their employees? Is that fair to say?
Yeah, more specifically, as I did mention, and you alluded to the downward, upward, inward, and horizontal forms. Let me just briefly explain maybe a couple of points about them.
Please.
So downward mobbing or bullying is when a very powerful person or a person of authority, such as manager or supervisor or team leader, or anybody who's at a higher level than a person, are using their power at the organization to exert their position power over the specific employee in a negative or in an intimidating manner on a regular basis. There are also situations where groups of employees band together to go actually against the boss or a superior. So that is known as upward bullying. And in some industries or cases, such as education or even in healthcare, bullying can be inward, initiated by, for example, students, faculty, customers, clients, vendors, or even patients or patients' families, in some cases, in the case of healthcare, as they develop a relationship over time, and the employee may feel helpless because the patient exudes power over them. In the case of a faculty environment in a university or college, it would be the student basically exuding their power, or one person initiates it, and the whole class is basically against the faculty or even the dean level. And then there's the horizontal bullying, which is when a group of employees working together harass another coworker. And neither one necessarily has formal power over the other, but nonetheless, when it's more than one individual, obviously they can be very powerful and intimidating and producing a lot of stress for the employee.
Thank you very much. And is it fair to say that as a mobbing progresses, it can come from all angles at the same time?
Right. And again, one person could be initiating this and everybody else is supporting the challenge here or the mobbing. And in some cases, those who don't necessarily believe in mobbing, they support it because they don't want to be the next victim of the ringleader in this case.
Okay, thank you very much. And perhaps this will lead into we could talk a bit about what scapegoating is. Now, when the target leaves or is expelled or whatever happens, do they tend to pick a new scapegoat, this dynamic? Is this inevitable?
Not necessarily, but in some cases, workplace mobbing is obviously targeted toward one individual. So when he or she leaves the company, resigns or quits or is terminated, it does not necessarily go into somebody else, or it does not necessarily impact anybody else because they were targeting the one person. But obviously, if a person is a bully, he or she is not going to stop with one person until he or she gets the rank or the hierarchy that the person wants. So in some cases, yeah, if the solution is that you basically blame somebody else, maybe when the person leaves, somebody else becomes the target.
Thank you very much. And Dr. Mujtaba, this I hope I make sense when I ask you this question. This may sound strange. It may not. Can the mobbing ever progress outside of the organization? And by that, what I mean is it gets so extreme that the target's custody situations are spread around the workplace. The target's ex-husband or wife is stalked and harassed. Their friends are harassed. Can it ever progress into something where we could say criminal, essentially?
Most certainly it could, because remember, one element of definition of workplace mobbing is spreading false rumors. So those rumors could eventually obviously be proven false, and it could be a case of slander or libel where the person can sue the manager or the colleague who's spreading those rumors, and he or she can be held liable in a court of law. But generally speaking, workplace mobbing is actually associated with the workplace. Even if we go back 100 years ago to the times of the father of scientific management, Frederick Taylor, who focused on efficiency, even he noticed that there were workplace mobbing. He actually did not call it workplace mobbing during 1905, 1910. So over 100 years ago, he called it systematic soldiering, which we know today as workplace bullying or group bullying or bullying on steroids.
Yes.
So in the modern workplace, mobbing involves one or more employees ganging up to target or bully a coworker through isolating him or humiliating him or her, or even being aggressive with a person. Mm-hmm. But actually, it has been around for many years. Again, with scientific management going back 100 years ago, known as systematic soldiering, which Frederick Taylor said that it resulted from group pressure for individuals to conform to output norms that were set by the work group. So if, let's say, the ringleader of a work group does not want to produce more than a certain quantity of output in a given day, and then there's one person who goes above and beyond and the average, and he or she's outperforming everybody else, then everybody, unfortunately, is going to be pressuring that person to slow down his or her output. So most cases, it starts in the workplace, but it can have ramifications beyond the workplace.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Dr. Mujtaba. And is this tactic ever utilized because an employee made a complaint of, say, racial discrimination or sexual harassment, or say they were going to go to the police and report one of their colleagues for stalking them, or one of their managers, or one of their employees? Is this ever used as a method to prevent anything like that from happening, or to send a message to the other coworkers, don't you dare?
Unfortunately, it could start with that. So if somebody is complaining that he or she was excluded from decisions in the workplace, and they are advocating for diversity, but a specific individual does not like that, or his or her philosophy is very different, yeah, certainly it could start with that one incident. And then, although there are non-retaliation laws when somebody is complaining or reporting an abuse or discriminatory practice, but nonetheless, obviously, when somebody's powerful, he or she can get away with it. And also, he or she can rally up the other group members to basically bully or mob this one specific individual. So it's unfortunate, but can happen. And the good news is that there are laws against that, as long as you can document it and report it and have some sort of evidence. And unfortunately, some cases obviously can get very, very bad. We've seen, for example, not only in the US, but other countries, the political rhetoric that unfortunately impacts people quite often. And sadly, about 45% of target individual, about 45% of the targeted individuals suffer from stress-related health problems, because they cannot just leave all of this in the workplace. We tend to take all of the stress and anxiety home, and unfortunately impacts us individually, both psychologically and physically, but also it impacts our family members as well, because the stress can be chronic. It doesn't go away after a day or two.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. And I just have I'm curious here about what are if we're just looking at, if we were to take out the human element of this and just look at the cost of this behavior on organizations, is this a measure? But can you even measure the cost that this takes on organizations? What does that look like?
Well, costs can be extremely high. There are no specific numbers that obviously can be quantified to exact numbers, but we know, for example, disengagement of employees can cost billions of dollars just in the US alone. So one study I read that disengaged employees cost American companies about $450 billion annually. So those who are victims of mobbing ultimately become less productive if they do stay in the organization and they become disengaged. But unfortunately, most of the time they end up being terminated or leaving the company for non-performance or for basically having too much anxiety. So that can be very costly, because then the organization not only is missing a good employee or experienced person from working, but then they have to eventually replace that person. So the cost of replacing that person can be extremely high for organizations where they do have bullying managers or supervisors who are not very good supervisors and constantly do the same thing in terms of yelling, screaming, pushing, and negatively influencing or bullying others into high performance or to get their way. So the cost can be enormous, actually, but they're very difficult to quantify in numbers.
Thank you. I figured as much. That would be absolutely astronomical. And at the end of the day, the bottom line, who is ethically and legally responsible for preventing and dealing with mobbing in a workplace?
Well, ethically, we're all responsible. Legally, the managers in the corporation is responsible for providing a good, healthy work environment for all employees. And in some cases, when employees are being forced into working long hours, working unsafely, or being pushed into dangerous situations, you and I know that employees can call OSHA, the Occupational Safety and Health Administration, and OSHA can send health inspectors to an organization to assess the dangers associated with operating machinery or the workplace not being a healthy environment for people where employees are getting sick. So that can obviously be very costly from a legal point of view. But ultimately, we're all responsible ethically as employees, as coworkers, as witnesses. But managers and their employers or the owners are also legally liable, obviously, to make sure they provide a safe work environment for all of their employees and also customers, vendors, contractors who actually come into the workplace.
Thank you. And actually that leads me right to this question here. What are the potential legal ramifications for either facilitating this or allowing this to flourish in your workplace?
Well, there can be a number of different costs associated with allowing any form of bullying in the workplace. So bullying can easily be related to the creation of a hostile work environment or even harassment. So harassment can be bullying just in general, or it could be in this form of sexual harassment. So we know the hostile work environment is one way employees need to prove that harassment seriously affected his or her psychological well-being, or that it can cause him or her injury or did cause injury. So that would be a hostile work environment. On the other hand, a harassment environment where somebody is being sexually harassed could be any repeated unwanted behavior of sexual nature that is perpetrated upon the individual by one or more people. But when it's done by superiors, it can be even more costly. Generally, workplace mobbing is not necessarily of a harassment. It's not generally of sexual nature, but it can be any form of harassment. And those harassment can come upon individuals because they fall in a protected category, like being of a different religion than the majority, being female, or being of a different ethnicity, or having a disability, for example, or he or she could be an older worker. In other words, being above 40 years of age, which is a protected category according to the federal law. So again, if those harassments or bullying the victims fall in any of these categories, they can sue based on the protected category, which can be very costly for the company.
I can only imagine, Dr. Mujtaba, and finally here, a question would be, if somebody is watching this who wants to start a business or is a manager and has benevolent intentions towards their organization, or is an employee watching this is happening to me, or this is happening to somebody, I'm witnessing this. Do you have any first steps of advice?
Well, yeah, let me just again summarize that workplace mobbing can take many tactics or ways of operationalizing the workplace. The verbal aggression, the stonewalling, excluding somebody from meetings or from emails, gossip or slander, the physical aggression that unfortunately takes place. So, for example, if you're being a victim of stonewalling, that basically means you're being excluded from work activities, from completing your tasks, from planning various events, which means that people's suggestions or projects are being ignored or delayed. Eventually, those individuals who are victims of mobbing obviously are talked to by their managers in terms of why you're not completing your job, and they cannot always explain it. So they're being stonewalled by very powerful people or by groups of individuals. As a matter of fact, there was an example of Deutsche Bank employee where a female employee was being stonewalled by her colleagues on a regular basis. They even made statements like, you're no good, you stink, things like that. Eventually it can get to you when it comes from many individuals. day in and day out. So this treatment of stonewalling created a very, very harsh environment or bad work environment for her to a point where she could not really concentrate. So she was always being abused. The work environment was hostile. Eventually, she was terminated, which is a lose-lose, obviously, both for the employee as well as for the company. It came to a point where she was on suicide watch and went into a deep depression. So unfortunately, if you are an employee that is experiencing some sort of isolation, humiliation, or gossip or slander or rumors based on one individual or groups of individuals in the workplace constantly saying these things, you need to bring it up to the attention of the human resource department, and the human resource department is responsible for investigating this immediately and thoroughly to make sure it does not repeat itself and is taken care of. But most importantly, you should also document this by yourself, even if you're not reporting it, and face the person who is the main bully, because bullies don't like people who speak back to them. So face it head on. It doesn't mean you have to be physically aggressive. It doesn't mean you have to do what they're doing to you, because that would be wrong as well. But you talk to the person, mention the facts, mention your feelings, and mention your future expectations, that you do not like to be victims of rumors or victim of physical aggression or verbal aggression. But keep in mind that unfortunately, people get involved in mobbing for many reasons. It could be because of professional jealousy. For example, if you're very well educated compared to your colleagues and bosses, sometimes, unfortunately, they may feel threatened. So they want to maintain the status quo. They want to be in the position of power. So then you could be a victim of workplace mobbing. Sometimes pushing out difficult or underperforming employees could be another reason for workplace mobbing. So just because somebody is underperforming does not mean we need to bully him or her as a group of individuals until he or she voluntarily leaves. That is just wrong. So if somebody's not performing well, we need to have a talk with him or her so he or she's clear what the expectations are and approach this from a professional perspective. And then other reasons for mobbing might be that some individuals want to drive out the whistleblowers. And there could be personality reasons or conflicts that exist between individuals. But in all cases, obviously, bring this to the attention of human resource department.
And Dr. Mujtaba, if you are comfortable speculating on that, if not, that's fine. If the human resources and top management are sort of on board with the mobbing process, is it just best for the targeted employee to be looking for other employment in the meantime?
Well, obviously, if the stress is so high to where it's impacting you mentally or psychologically or even physically, you're getting sick, there's no reason to continue going to the workplace. Right. But my recommendation is always to basically mention the facts, let people know your feelings regarding what was said based on facts. So if somebody was spreading false rumors, that's a fact that they were spreading false rumors about you, and your feelings are that you don't like that, you feel hurt and disappointed, and then your future expectations. So that's what I call the 3F model: facts, feelings, future expectations. In most cases, it takes care of the problem because you face it head on. But if it doesn't obviously prevent the problem, you have to bring it to the attention of human resources. And if that does not help, then you get an attorney or leave the company. But leaving is not always the solution, because these individuals who are involved in bullying or mobbing behaviors, they just continue sometimes doing the same thing to others. They might even get promoted, unfortunately, because people are being too stressed out, and they might suffer personally at their home life, but obviously they would be working hard in the workplace, but usually comes at a cost to everyone. But my recommendations for managers and human resource professionals is that whenever an employee is being harassed, train them to remain watchful as managers for any potential workplace mobbing encounters that happen in any place. as managers and human resource professionals, as team leaders, immediately address any unprofessional and inappropriate behavior. Keep detailed records and documentations of any incidents of mobbing, and then escalate and follow up accordingly. So go up to the higher level if it cannot be solved at your level as a department manager. Remind employees and managers in the entire organization what the expectations are, what is professional behavior, and what does it look like. Remember the code of conduct that all employees have in the organization, and managers are obviously held to a higher levels because they're role models. As managers and team leaders, you should maintain open door and always guarantee confidentiality, so people come to you to let you know that they witnessed somebody being bullied or they were a victim of it. Unfortunately, about 30 to 40% of people feel as though they were bullied during the last year, but many of them don't always report that.
Right.
And know your expert or designated HR professional for a department to talk to make a phone call and to report these situations. And in all times, obviously, as a manager, as a team leader, try to maintain an inclusive work environment where everybody feels included and they can speak their mind whenever they are being bothered by something.
Thank you very much. And thank you, Dr. Mujtaba, for speaking on this issue. I don't know exactly how it is in the States, but in Canada, workplace mobbing is not a common term at all. It's bullying or harassment. Mobbing is not even a known term to a lot of people. So I'm so grateful that you use that term to highlight that aspect of bullying on steroids, essentially. And before I let you go here and just say bye to you after we stop recording, is there a place, I know you have a YouTube channel, and I'm certainly going to link that in the description box below. Is there a place that people can go to find more of your articles or find out more about this or what you're doing?
I think on Google and YouTube, there are a couple of videos, and then on Google, as long as you type workplace mobbing, I think there are a lot of good resources there. And the article that my co-author and I discussed, workplace mobbing, was published in Business Ethics and Leadership Journal. So that's available freely on PDF file that anybody can download, or a link can be provided for them. So that the goal is to basically understand what bullying is. And then when you see it in the workplace, to do something about it. That's the most important part, because unfortunately, if we don't do something about it, it can take very, very serious forms where people take the law into their own hands. And unfortunately, we've noticed there was in 2019 a case in Virginia Beach Municipal Center shooting victims where 12 people unfortunately died because there was an unhappy employee who had submitted his resignation that was involved in a mass shooting in the Virginia Beach case. And in this case, his name was Dwayne Craddock. So he was either upset, depressed, or unhappy, and unfortunately ended up killing 12 of his colleagues and injured 5 others. We don't want people to get to that point.
Yeah.
There was another incident, unfortunately, in the U.S. And this took place in Aurora, actually, and 5 people were killed. So that happened in February of 2019, where 5 superiors were killed and colleagues, while injuring 6 others in that place. So apparently he was going to be fired and perceived that everyone was against him and chose to take a gun with him to the workplace that day and became very violent during the termination process. So we need to discuss shortcomings of employees with them in a professional manner, in a non-intimidating manner. And if somebody's going to be fired, it should not be a surprise to that person, because they would have feelings of unjustly being fired. So we need to communicate with everyone. And as individuals, we can watch videos on YouTube, we can watch articles, we can look at the Bullying Institute, for example. They provide a lot of information. The Society for Human Resource Managers provide a lot of information regarding good practices in the workplace to monitor bullying and having anti-harassment policies. So corporations need to institute those policies, but as individuals, whenever we see them, we need to say something. Otherwise, the bullying and mobbing will continue, which is not a good thing. I remembered at Nova Southeastern University, I went to a health conference, actually, the university had. There was a human resources department representative at the conference, and there was a huge sign. And the sign from far away, as you were walking into the hallway, you could see that it said that when a behavior is offensive, derogatory, inappropriate, harassing, pressuring, invasive, intimidating, threatening, isolating, forceful, violent, assaulting, you need to intervene. In other words, that's not something we want to happen to us. Therefore, we shouldn't want it to happen to anybody else. So if we're being witnesses to that type of bullying or harassment, we need to do something about it. In other words, we need to become a cultural ally. We need to defend our colleagues, and we just need to say something. That's as far as we can go, and hopefully it will prevent it. If we're the victim, we can also report it to HR in case the first incident of facing the bully head-on does not take care of it.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Mujtaba. Thank you very much for taking the time to join me today. I know it's a busy week in the United States, so I'm very, very grateful to you. I thank you so much for bringing this issue to light and for helping all kinds of people with it. I'm very grateful to you.
Thank you to you, because you've posted a lot of nice website content that is practical, that can be used by all of us in the workplace to maintain a safe and a healthy environment, obviously, not just for ourselves, but also for our colleagues who are working with us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that a lot. Thank you very much.